Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner. What a 24 hours we have had with Illinois athletics as Will Riley and Kasparas Jakucionis go back-to-back in the NBA draft, the first one and dones in Illinois basketball history, and the first time in 20 years that two Illini have gone in the same first round of an NBA draft. We're going to dive deeper into that on a later podcast. I'm going to try and get Derek Piper, who is in Brooklyn, to give us insight on that. He's got 3 stories up on the website already from that night at Barclays Center. But Joey Wagner, we just met with Josh Whitman for a long time. This was a 3-hour plus conversation that we had with Josh Whitman, an hour and 47 minutes opening statement. We got a lot to break down. We're going to break down our biggest takeaways. We don't want to try and get too lost in the weeds of some of this stuff of college athletics that might bore or confuse some people, but we are going to address some of the big picture topics in college athletics and Illinois as well. But Joey, how you feeling?
I am good. That was like, we always kind of joke like, oh, what a long opening statement, but the opening statement does answer a lot of questions, and it helps us frame what we're going to be asking in the Q&A section. So yeah, it's long, but it's informative. It's not just Josh rambling for an hour and a half. You learn a lot from it, a lot of numbers in terms of the revenue for the year and all sorts of different things. And Jeremy, things have been pretty unsettled in college athletics. So I did kind of joke with him after, like, might not need to be this long next year if the house is settled a little bit, but there's a lot of moving parts right now.
Yeah, lots going on. And again, at the end of all of it, I think Illinois is very glad to have Josh Whitman at the helm of their program. And that certainly has proved to be the case through all this great reformation that is college athletics right now. To have somebody steady at the top of this as capable as Josh Whitman is really important for Illinois. And we'll dive into some of those specifics. I do want to get your reaction, Joey, to Kasparas Jakucionis falling in the draft to number 20, even going in. Like, we had talked about how his draft stock was likely to be affected by the last 6 weeks where he did not play all that well. And we talked about that here. But still, a lot of people had him as a top 10 prospect. A lot of these NBA draft experts, Gavoni had him 10. Sam Vecini had him 7. And CBS, I think Kyle Boone and Adam Finkelstein had him top 10 as well. And he falls to number 20 to Miami. And then Will Riley, back-to-back, is like, when are these guys going to go? It was kind of nerve-wracking, I think, for most Illini supporters, and I'm sure they're at Barclays Center. And then back-to-back within 10 minutes, both those guys are off the board. What was your take?
Yeah, one, I think KJ landed in a really good spot with Miami. Like, the Heat are one of those organizations that do things very, very well and very, very right. So that's a good spot for him to go with Eric Spoelstra, to be in that organization, that culture. I think that was something he liked about Illinois. It's the structure and the way that happened. I didn't think he'd get to 20. I mean, we knew it was interesting, and we won't belabor this, Jeremy, for too long, but that January, February batch of mock drafts was like, is he number 3? Is he number 5? Like, oh, there's no way he'll get to 8. Like, that was kind of the vibe. And he just didn't play very well in February and March. And big moments, it just wasn't there. The turnovers were really alarming. I personally thought that the wrist may have been bothering him more, but I can almost assure you that if that was a thing, that would have been circular. Like, that wording would have been around a little bit in the pre-draft process. So at that point, then mock drafts had him in that mid-lottery, late lottery, however you want to look at it. I thought trades could shake things up, and I don't know that they shook things up to affect him in that way. So I didn't think it was going to be 20, but I did. What's that? Maybe 5 spots, 6 spots further than you would think he would have gone. But the end result is he landed at a spot that was really good for him.
I will have a whole KJ discourse when we dive into this more with Derek at some point that I want to get into. But that's a bigger slide than I thought. Like, I thought he could move potentially outside of the lottery. I heard the workouts weren't all that great for him shooting wise, which was a question that came up late in the season. I do think people forget what he did against Arkansas, what he did against Missouri, really good teams early in the season. Like, he looked like a top 10 pick. Yeah, Oregon. Like, he looked like it. And it wasn't just us here talking about how good he looked. It was all these guys who know better than us, and they continued to say that through the end of this. I also thought there was just a run. Like once Jeremiah Fears went, like there weren't a lot of teams that needed guards in that kind of middle section of the teens and in the early section of the teens. And what does Miami Heat always do? They take good talent, and whenever it always seems to fall right to them. So I think they got great value, and I think this is the perfect fit for Kasparas Jakucionis. So while his first NBA contract might not be as big as he had hoped, he's still making millions and millions of dollars and going to a team and an organization that develops people. I don't think they're a title contender because they don't have that top end of talent yet. But Bam Adebayo is a great fit alongside KJ because he can cover up some of those defensive flaws he has. And then playing alongside Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, Nikola Jovic, and Jaime Jaquez, like there's good shooters and offensive players around him. And most importantly, he's got the best maybe coach in the NBA and Eric Spoelstra, who's going to know how to use him, know how to develop him. And I think having Pat Riley around and all that bag of rings he's got, I thought it was an anxiety inducing wait, but I don't think there could have been a better fit. Like I didn't even think of Miami because I didn't think he'd fall to 20. But when you talk about roster culture, I think he got in the right fit. And then Will Riley's just going to a rebuilding franchise, continually rebuilding one in Washington that kind of just takes in a high upside flyer. I like it for Washington. And I would have hated him going to the Wizards maybe 6 months ago, Joey. But now that they've added Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum alongside Marcus Smart, at least there's some adults in that room. So I feel like he's going to have a chance. Playing time's going to be hard early because they get a lot of young forwards, including Kaishan George, who's kind of the exact type of player Will Riley is. But makes sense for the Wizards, man. Take a huge upside swing and see what Will Riley could be in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, let him develop, let him learn how to be a pro from some of those guys that you mentioned. Washington is not. We don't talk about the Wizards in the way that we talk about the Heat. They're career rebuilders. It's what they do. But yeah, he was a guy that you knew was going to take a little time. Like we even talked, like, hey, Oklahoma City could make sense because you could just let him be in the NBA incubator for a season and a half, and let him get those weight gains, get whatever it is that he needs to do. And maybe Washington will offer a similar like path trajectory that we thought some of those more contending teams would have offered.
Yeah, and there was no reason either of those guys should have came back. Both of those guys going in the top 21 shows that they made the right decisions. And what a moment for Brad Underwood in his program. For Brad, Jeff Alexander, Orlando Antigua, Tyler Underwood, all those guys out there. Adam Fletcher, who made it right back because we saw him today in Champaign. Really cool moment for the program, Joey, and it just helps them sell the next group of NBA guys, whether it's a 5-star prospect, prep prospect like Will Riley, or the next great European player. You got those pictures that you can send from Brooklyn, from the draft, of Brad Underwood hugging those guys, congratulating those guys, and those two standing next to each other with the NBA draft hats, the right NBA draft hat with Will Riley by the time he got around to it. What a remarkable sell and another step forward for the program. Because yes, Illinois did not go that far in the NCAA tournament, but those guys helped you win an NCAA tournament game, win 22 games. You don't do it without that type of talent. Now, if you can continue to get veterans and supplement them with talent like this, that's what national title contenders have.
Yeah, it's a good sell, right? You've seen the wins happen under Brad Underwood really since that 2019-2020 season. You've seen the talent come in. The questions were, hey, deep postseason, you saw that happen 2 seasons ago, and can you make guys into pros? Can you help them get to that level? I would assume Terrence Shannon, to the NBA in particular, and now Will Riley and KJ. Can we just talk real quick? The hat thing, the logo thing, that's got to get fixed. Like, it cannot be all that difficult. You're going to have Will Riley go up there in a Jazz hat. Technically, the Jazz are the ones that selected Will Riley. The picture from that night with Adam Silver is going to be with a Jazz hat and a Jazz logo. And then Adam Silver is going to go up there 20 minutes later and say, hey, surprise, Will Riley got traded to the Washington Wizards. It's dumb. It's taken away that moment that would hang in their office, in their house, or wherever. Like, you want that to be right. And, obviously one player with one team for their whole careers is the outlier at this point. But if Will Riley stays with the Washington Wizards for his whole career, the picture from the moment that it all happened is him and Jazz stuff. That's dumb. Yeah. It's just stupid. There's got to be a better way to do this. I understand there are more trades in the NBA draft than in the NFL draft, especially as you get into that first round and every pick has been moved like 10 times, it feels like, but just figure out a way to get the kids the right hat.
2 of the last 21 picks were not traded at some point. Not just last night, but throughout the course of time here. Another thing that I got yesterday, Joey, is this is such an arbitrary stat, but since 2010, only 5 programs had had players go back-to-back in the NBA draft. Like, that's kind of an arbitrary stat, right? Like, but I kind of found it interesting because
is that first round only? Or,
yeah,
first
round
okay,
only
okay.
college teammates. So I didn't include the Thompson twins or things like that. So I mean, there's times where the guy goes 11 and 13, right? So it's really kind of arbitrary, but I just thought it was kind of fun to look at. The other 4 programs that have had players go back to back since 2010: Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Kansas. Literally, it is Illinois and the Blue Bloods that have had players go back to back. So it was just kind of good company. You had like Mark Williams and AJ Griffin was the last one in 2022. Kentucky's PJ Washington, Tyler Hero, Kentucky's Trey Lyles and Devin Booker, Kentucky's Anthony Davis and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, North Carolina's Kendall Marshall and John Henson, Kansas, Markieff Morris and Marcus Morris, the twins, and Kansas, Cole Aldrich and Xavier Henry back in 2010. So pretty good company. It's kind of arbitrary, but I just thought it was a fun fact.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cool part of that, if you're those programs, is there's now 7 minutes of TV discussion that's just a PR pitch for your program. I think I I can't tell you I had my TV off of mute last night, but
yeah,
I was busy doing other stuff.
I want to mention that. I don't know why anybody would be watching the ABC broadcast with Stephen A. Smith. It's just not my cup of tea, but he's really talented and gets people to watch TV apparently. ESPN's broadcast has to be better. It has to be better. There just wasn't enough ball talk. Like, I get it. There's a big moment. I think we should give time to telling their stories, all that. Let's talk a little basketball, how they fit with these teams. And Kendrick Perkins does not belong up there. He doesn't know enough about these guys. Jay Billis, the college guy, good to have him. Get a GM. Bob Myers is on your payroll. Like, get him in, talk about these prospects, have some thoughts and opinions on these things. And I would love if the coach was on there just to kind of break that stuff down. So I just think it needs to be better, man. Like, I get it. You want to tell these moments, but that's why I put on NFL Network for the NFL draft. Because yes, you can talk about those stories, the people of it. It's interesting. I also want to know about how it fits. And I just don't get enough of that from ESPN's NBA draft broadcast.
Yeah, I think it's also when you're telling stories that are culminations of years and years of time, it's really hard to do that in shortened windows. And I think if you those shortened windows and some can be done really well. So I don't want to paint broadly and say it can't.
Well,
But I
Cooper
think
Fleck's easy, right? You do that in the lead up to the draft and the lead up in the pregame show. I think that's what the pre-draft show should be, to be honest with you. But
I was kind of messing around the house, making dinner, and really have it unmuted. So I was having conversations at home, but I saw some of the feedback online.
It can be better. It can be better. All right, let's dive into Josh Whitman. 3 hours of content to break down. One of our media peers was like, man, the next podcast you guys have is going to be 6 hours of explaining all this stuff. We're not going to go that far because I don't want to dive too far in the weeds to bore or lose people, but there are some big things that we need to break down. I do want to start with some of the fun stuff here, or the bigger news that kind of comes out of this that I think fans will care about just as much as anything. Josh Whitman did announce today that the Illinois-Missouri football series has been shrunken from 8 games to 6 games. And the 2026 and 2032 games are no longer on the schedule. Whitman also said there will be a home and home element of this series, but they're also looking at neutral site games. This does a few things, Joey. It frees up their 2026 schedule to not have 11 Power 5 opponents. And I'm sure Brett Bielema was very, very happy about that because it's going to be a rebuilding year anyway for Illinois. Maybe not rebuilding, but you're losing a lot of very, very good talent from your team, including your quarterback, a lot of your offensive line, a lot of your defensive guys. So to have 11 would have just been a really, really tough year. And it just makes no sense to do that. So that frees that up a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting, to see what they add in 2026. I'm sure it's going to be a bye game opponent, but we've heard whispers of this for a while that this series could change, and it really needed to change because you just can't have 11 Power 5 conference opponents. I still hope there's home and home 4 games. But the interesting part is Josh Whitman said St. Louis isn't the only neutral site place that they could go. My speculation goes, does it go to Soldier Field and Arrowhead Stadium? I wonder if that's where they go from there.
Yeah, that would also be my guess. If I would prefer just do it in St. Louis, the the home and home, and then do the other 2.
Could we do it though?
St. Louis.
St. Louis, like Edward Jones Zone, all due respect. Could we do it in like Busch Stadium? That'd be really cool.
That'd be cool.
That'd be really
cool.
Because you're doing it.
They kind of saw how to do that at Wrigley, right? Like how to do it effectively now and study. I think that'd be a lot of fun, to be honest with you. That's a good call. But yeah, trimming this back to this isn't basketball, right? Like Underwood will load up the schedule because it doesn't hurt. The net rankings, all that favors a loss in college football is really detrimental to your road towards that college football playoff or bowl eligibility, whatever the 2026 version of Illinois is pushing for, whether that's continue a bowl streak, whether that's, really try to get that top 5-6 finish in the Big Ten. They are losing a lot. It doesn't make sense to stack a ton of Power 5 opponents on that schedule if there's no reward for it on the other side, if there's no uniformity. If you go back to what Brett Bielema talked about in Chicago last week in terms of these automatic bids for the college football playoff, if the Big Ten and SEC are not playing the same amount of conference games and there's no partnership between the two to play a Big Ten and SEC opponent, why would you do it? At that point, it just becomes a race for wins. Obviously, you want to test your team in ways that you can. You want to give your fans good non-conference opponents in ways that you can, but you also don't want to be, I don't want to say reckless because that feels a little steep, but you want to be intelligent about how you do it. And doing that, like if no one else is scheduling 11 Power 4 games in a season, why would you now? And right now you're continuing to stack these sustained winning seasons. And it's just, if no one else is doing it, there's really no need to be the first. And I know some fans are going to say, what? That doesn't make sense. Schedule the best opponents. I get that. And yeah, you want to play quality games, but you also want to keep making sure you're not putting your team at a disadvantage for the sake of doing it.
Yeah. The other part of this is Missouri, while the SEC only has 8 conference games at the moment, will they change that? Will they need to change that by next year? That'll be interesting to see moving forward as all these college football playoff conversations continue. But they also have Kansas on the schedule. So they would have had, 10, Power 4 games when most of their conference peers only have 9. So they wanted to it was a mutual decision, Brett Bielema, or Josh Whitman said today. So that was interesting. Another bit of scheduling news that I find very exciting. Illinois is playing UConn at Madison Square Garden. That is known as Storrs South, right? South? North? I don't know when I'm in these.
Near Storrs?
Near Storrs.
Storrs adjacent.
Storrs adjacent. I like that. It sounds like a band. Yeah, they're probably going to return that game. It sounds like United Center in 2027. So 2 seasons from now that UConn would come back. Fantastic. Those are the kind of matchups you need in Chicago if you're going to bring that United Center game back. Whitman brought that up about, this season being able to play Alabama. They're excited about that after that series was just dying. As Illinois struggled, as they struggled to get good opponents. So to start that off with Alabama and potentially UConn would be quite a bang in 2 of 3 years to do that. Doesn't sound like it's finalized quite yet, but that's exciting. And it just kind of, again, reinforces where they're going with how they want to schedule, right? It sounds like they want to do probably 2 home and home series at once, 1 at home, 1 away each year, 1 neutral site at United Center, obviously the bragging rights game, 1 neutral site away. And you're just getting some of the best opponents in the country. I mean, you get Dan Hurley and UConn to United Center will be a lot of fun.
Hold on. I have to just go back really quickly. The neutral site, could it be Nashville for Mizzou and Illinois? If you don't do, it's a destination. They're roughly similar travel spots. I don't know why you would, other than just to
so far away from. I mean, it's far enough away from both fan bases that
it doesn't make a ton of sense, other than to give someone a weekend in Nashville, give a fan base a weekend in that. It doesn't make sense. The more likely outcomes would be St. Louis or the 2 that you brought up, but that hit me.
I think I'd rather have it in St. Louis. I'd like it at Busch Stadium as opposed to Arrowhead and Soldier Field, but it would be a cool experience for the players. And I just don't love taking your games away from home and home. I love home and homes in college football. I would continue to do that, but obviously they have some interest in doing it for a reason.
Yeah. Anyway, back to basketball. That's just a random thought. This is what you need in Chicago. We covered the United Center games before the pause that was really necessary. One, the program just wasn't in particularly great standing towards the end of that run. And two, you weren't drawing the schedule that you're drawing now. I mean, is it New Mexico? I mean, that was a Lou Henson. Yeah. I mean, I understood the connections.
Still, that was a reach. You had to reach to do that, right? And you had Ohio State as a conference game. You're taking a home conference game.
No,
it's hard to get 4,000 people there. Yeah, it was embarrassing at the time.
It was. So you need a draw, right? You need somewhere that it makes sense. Like now, hey, you're not going to these other college campuses. You're going to go to Madison Square Garden, or you're going to go to, wherever to play some of these other teams. But yeah, this is what draws. This will draw. Your program is firmly back. You're drawing nationally prominent brands in college basketball. If those don't draw, then you just got to pull the plug on the United Center concept for some time moving forward. But I'm with you. Like in the sense of football, I would like just more straight up home and homes.
Yeah.
But if you're you've got to compromise on some of those things, and playing UConn, playing Alabama, Tennessee, whoever, and some of those neutral site, quote unquote, more regionally home games, however you want to look at it, those make sense to do. And I like that they're doing. I'm curious what the turnout will be. I think it should be good given who you have in these games, but we'll see how that looks.
We knew another piece of news here. We knew that Brett Bielema has a non-compete in the Big Ten on his current contract extension that he's just signed. We also know that Brad Underwood has a non-compete with every college team in the country with his new contract extension. So basically, especially with Underwood, it shows that I think he wants to be here until he retires. But we also learned today that 5 other coaches have non-competes, including Shauna Green has a non-compete in the Big Ten. Brad Dancer and Petros Cupriano, very good coaches. Petros, what he's done with track has been amazing. Those guys have non-competes in college athletics. This is stability was a big word that Josh Whitman brought up today. It's important to him, and it doesn't mean they're complacent. But I asked them afterwards what it means to have Brett Bielema and Brad Underwood locked up, potentially to decade-plus long runs. He said, I think it could usher in an age unlike anything we've ever seen at Illinois. We can do things we've never done before. That's pretty exciting. And give them a reason to sign big contracts, give them a lot of money, and on the back end, they get a lot of stability because those coaches probably aren't going anywhere with those contracts. But they also want to be here. To sign those contracts, Joey, it shows those coaches want to be here and think they can achieve the greatest things they can in the sport here at Illinois.
Yeah, you're not signing that just for X% more on your contract if you don't really think that the pieces are in place to win the Big Ten, to win national championships. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it for Josh Whitman, right? Like, yeah, we'll pay a little bit more if we don't have to worry about every time, when Kirk Ferentz retires from Iowa, if I don't have to sit here and sweat over what Brett Bielema is going to do, or if Wisconsin opens up again, or Nebraska was open when I believe Nebraska was open when Brett signed his first Big Ten non-compete, places and footprints where you would think that your coach would have success for another university. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of relief, I would imagine, in feeling like that. Or Brad Underwood, you don't have to worry about, Texas is open. What
Kansas State got to be where
Kansas State. You have to worry about the retail market. Like, you just don't have to worry about that stuff at this point. Shauna Green was a big one. Like, obviously, I cover women's basketball closely. You look around, Iowa came open, if only for literally like 35 seconds last offseason. Shauna Green's from Iowa. You have to, it's our job to wonder, would that make sense? Would it make sense if, another prominent Big Ten job came open and you don't have to think about that. And
like she coached at Dayton. So like, what if Ohio State opened up, right? Like they're going to be there for a while because they're really good. But yeah, you think about those things. You don't have to worry about that for now.
no, and it's huge. You're going to pay for that on the other end, but it's worth when Josh Whitman can go down the list and talk about revenue increases year over year, because the coaches you have in place are building rosters and building coaching staffs and coaching to the point that you have an appealing product that can increase ticket revenue. That makes you attractive to go be in, some of these marquee environments. Yeah, it's meaningful, and shout out to him for creating a place where they believe in what he does, and he doesn't shy away from it, and it's clearly bought in.
Yeah, and as you know, Joey, like I know this, right? Like me with 24/7 Sports, you with us, like it's to sign a contract somewhere, you got to believe in the people you're with, and you got to believe in that place and where you're going. So, yeah, I think it says a lot about Josh Whitman and what he's fostered with that program. Speaking of that, they made a record $190 million of revenue this past year, including a record $17.6 million in ticket revenue. So a bunch of numbers came out of this, but they're doing well because basketball and football are doing well. But women's basketball ticket sales has gone up 300% since Shauna Green started. That's pretty amazing. A couple other things for the fans. There's an orange out for the Ohio State game. That'll be interesting to watch and see. But also facilities upgrades. There's not many of them. They're on the back burner as you pay players now. That is more important than the facilities arms race. But you will have new Wi-Fi at Memorial Stadium, so you can get caught up on Joey Wagner's tweets during the Illini football game. $9 million for a new Wi-Fi system. I mean, that's almost most of the ticket revenue last year when you think about it. But obviously very important for fans to stay connected. And then a new scoreboard, lights, and sound system will go in Memorial Stadium by the 2026 season. And no, there was no hockey talk in this one because that's not happening. And Illinois is probably fortunate they didn't spend all that money because they now need to spend that in the players rather than a $100 million facility and a hockey program. But bummer when it happened. But yeah, nothing groundbreaking on that regard, Joey. Is there any other like those small little things you want to hit on before we dive into these bigger topics?
No, I'm not good at wireless headphones, so I did accidentally cut you off. So I don't know if you mentioned this. Just real quick on the Wi-Fi. They'll have Wi-Fi in the Great West Hall and in the East balcony where you buy food, where you scan your ticket so you don't have a log jam of trying to use Apple Pay. That'll be immediately. The at your seat Wi-Fi will be the USC game is when they plan to roll that out. Did you touch on that?
No. And then Grange Grove, I believe they said by the USC game, I believe too. I thought that's
yes. Let me up and running in the concourses of the stadium. Ticket concessions retail for first game by USC throughout the rest of the stadium and Grange Grove. Beyond that, new video board sounds like 2026, and there's going to be a lot of monitors. It sounds like around Memorial Stadium, new light system coming in, but the Wi-Fi was a big one because that's honestly, I mean, especially from a standpoint of this is how I'm buying a beer, this is how I'm buying a hot dog with Apple Pay. All of your tickets are preferred mobile, like that. That just makes a fan experience better, and also you would like to send a text. But imagine from time to time at your seat.
That's right. All right, let's dive into some of these bigger topics. I mean, number one, last year, I kind of had to remind myself, like we were sitting here talking to Josh Whitman about the House settlement and when it gets passed at that time. And he really brought up and was telling fans, like, we have to make big decisions. What do we want to support? What has to get all of our resources? And are we okay if we have to not give as many resources to some other programs or even have to shutter some programs? A year later, he said, we're not doing that. All 21 sports are staying, and most sports, Joey, are going to have more scholarships moving forward. Now,
he said.
Yeah, so all the sports are going to get more scholarships. So there's going to be more female athletes than they've ever had on scholarship moving forward. And they're going to get more NIL. We'll dive into all of that than ever before. But that's pretty big news for the non-revenue sports because I was sitting there thinking, like, what are they going to do with baseball? What are they going to do with wrestling? What are they going to do with some of these sports that have good histories and some success at Illinois? But obviously, you want to invest in men's basketball, football, volleyball, women's basketball, men's golf, men's tennis at Illinois. But if these coaches like are getting more resources, and Josh said it could have made financial sense for us to take those away. But as I thought last year, a guy where Illinois means so much, I think it would have been really hard for him to shutter programs. Even one that's like barely hanging on by a thread in men's gymnastics. It's really hard to shutter a program with that history, with that many alumni. Men's gymnastics might go by the wayside anyway, just on all of college sports, because there's like 6 or 7 teams, it feels like, left. But I always thought it was going to be very hard for them to do that. And he's found enough resources, he says, and they found enough creative ways to raise money that they feel they can do this. And it's what they want to do. They don't want to shutter programs, even if financially it could make some sense.
Yeah, it's unquestionably a last resort type of idea to have to do that. And I did wonder, like the men's gymnastics was one I very much wondered about. So now it's how much is being pumped in to all of these programs now. Like, where do you, in terms of rev sharing, you mentioned the top 4. We'll get into that a little bit more. It sounds like there's going to be a scholarship increase, as you mentioned, across the way. Those are going to have ramifications. I mean, there's going to be SEC teams who are going to pour revenue sharing into baseball and not pick another non-football, non-men's basketball sport. Like, that's just, yeah, absolutely. Like, that's just how this is going to go. These are decisions that are going to have to be made, but you're keeping those sports. And that is, Josh Whitman mentioned it. There is kind of an ecosystem around each and every one of these sports that maybe they're not on the front page of our website every day. Maybe they're not leading the news or front page of the news, but there are a lot of people who care, who have invested time, money, energy into those programs. So maybe from us on the outside, it's like, well, yeah, men's gymnastics has 8 teams. Well, sorry, but there's a lot of depth, right, that goes in to those decisions. And not that it's impossible to undo, but it's sure pain to undo that once you've decided to go that route, and how that looks and the trust you have built within those communities. So, yeah, I thought that was a huge takeaway, that he's not cutting any of them. And now it's just a matter of what you put into them moving forward.
Yeah, he said he did not share specific scholarships for each sport, but he said they will make significant scholarship investments in every sport we sponsor. Then to go along with that, the House settlement brings upon revenue sharing. That starts July 1st. That's next week, Joey. These players are going to start to get paid by the school. And we could dive in a little bit to the licensing agreement, NIL, like buyout that happens with all that stuff. But he did not share how Illinois will split that $20.5 million in revenue sharing. That will actually be lower. Great question by you, Joey, because Illinois is going to go over scholarships, right? Like they're going to add scholarships. So that eats away at your cap up to $2.5 million. Don't want to get too far into the weeds of that. But a lot of athletic directors are not sharing their proprietary information of, we're giving football 75% and basketball 15%. That's the general model that has kind of been out there publicly. 75% football, so that's what, around 14, 15 million. 15% basketball, which is around 3 million. 5% women's basketball, 5%. Pretty much for volleyball for Illinois.
Whatever's important, whatever's big at your school.
All the other sports, right? All the other sports. He said it's not exactly in line with that model, but it's not far off. He said 98% of the revenue share will go to football, basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball. So that makes sense given that they bring in ticket revenue and are the, sports that get the most attention. That's not a surprise. I think he's probably closer to Purdue. I think Illinois, Mike Bobinski, the Purdue AD, did not give away exact figures, but he said football will be less than 75% than them. Men's basketball will be more than 15%. This is all my speculation. I would imagine here at Illinois, basketball is going to get more than 15%.
That is fair. So I'm curious what that actually looks like in terms of scholarships, which he's not disclosing how much they're adding or how much, whatever that is, and how much money actually goes where. Here's why you don't disclose it. If you're Josh Whitman, the second you say we're putting, let's just throw numbers. I don't know the numbers. We're putting 70% in football, 20% in men's basketball, 5 and 5. And if you're a Brett Bielema coaching or recruiting against a program that is, let's say, 78% in football, well, all of a sudden you are at an 8% recruiting disadvantage in terms of money, and you just don't want to be like, people will use that. That's just what it is. I don't know if that's the exact reason, why you're not sharing, and some of it may just be we don't have to, we're not going to. I have the same curiosities, but yeah, I mean, it's how it goes, and someone would unquestionably use that.
I told you before we started this, and I've written it. Brett Bielema, out of the blue, just said last year, like we were talking about all this stuff, the revenue share, and he said, just get me within a couple million of the top schools. I thought that was pretty specific. And it seemed like a conversation he's had probably with his athletic director and saying, hey, I get it. Men's basketball is huge here. But last year he kept saying, I was at 5 million. There were schools we competed against that were at 20 million and we still won 10 games. So if you get me within a couple million, say it's 12 or 13 million they have and everyone else, maybe Ohio State and Oregon have 17 million or something like that, that I can compete, that I have a chance to compete and win games. That just always has stuck out to me. And I feel like that's kind of probably a conversation he's had with his athletic director. But again, I don't know that for sure, but it stuck in my head.
Yeah. And to hammer home the other point you made, 98% of the 20 million, which as we mentioned, likely won't be a full 20 with the additional scholarship, football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball. I would imagine golf is going to get a hefty percent of the other 2%. Right, like that's just what your golf program is. Yeah, I mean, it's you want that to continue to be what it is, but those 4 sports are going to be the big ones. I don't know the difference between, that's how it's going to be. Women's basketball get a little bit more. Well, I don't know those answers.
Yeah, the thing with eating into the cap with your scholarships, Whitman must have had a conversation with his other coaches that scholarships might be more valuable to them. Right. Than some of these revenue share payments. Right. Because still a lot of money. Those scholarships are a lot of money to families with the opportunities. And if you're getting, say, Dan Hartleb's getting 5 more scholarships, imagine what you can do with that when you only had 13.9 or whatever it is. So yeah, it could, maybe that was the conversation that they had with all of that. The other thing we should bring up, ICON, their directive is changing. It was kind of knew this would happen with NIL. It's no longer a collective. It's going to be tasked with creating promotional opportunities within the community. So they already set up these community events, but basically the money now is all going to Illinois, right? The University of Illinois. They don't have to put in a third party. So there's no point of ICON doing that stuff. But ICON does have a lot of experience setting up community events, marketing opportunities that Illinois can pay them by doing these promotional opportunities at schools or whatever it is and community events. So they will be doing that. But Kathleen Knight, who's been the CEO of ICON, has stepped down. I know it's probably been a crazy 3 years for Kathleen Knight operating all that stuff. In their press release, Joey, they've been operating for what, 2.5, 3 years? They said they've raised $35 million during that time. That's a significant amount of money and tells you a little bit of the war chest that Illinois has had with all of this. So just another note that all that stuff is kind of coming in-house now with the House settlement. So it makes sense that ICON would kind of have a different role moving forward.
Yeah, there are going to be changes with this. And Josh Whitman said today, a lion's share of the money going into athletes' pockets will be by way of revenue sharing. Obviously, there will be NIL capabilities outside of that through NIL Go. I know we'll get into that, Jeremy, but because of that, what ICON has done so well for the last 2.5 years is kind of being shifted to rev share. And there are going to be changes that came by way of that.
Is there anything Illinois specific else that we should really hit on? Because more of this stuff we're going to talk about the Illinois parts of it, the angles of this, but a lot of the other stuff felt like the big picture stuff that Josh Whitman is very good at explaining and expounding on. But is there any other little things? Like I did ask about softball for people that care about softball, because they have not had a great couple of years, but I told Josh, it was like Tyra Perry and softball were one of the better programs before all these other programs rose up. But obviously not a good couple of years for them. He said he's got a lot of confidence in Tyra Perry. Feels like they have stability in the coaching staff now moving forward. So I did ask about that specific sport just because it's been a disappointing couple of years for them. And then volleyball, that's more in wrestling facilities wise. They got to figure out a plan there because Huff Hall obviously is pretty dang old for anybody who's been in there.
Yeah, both of those wrestling, volleyball have been kind of pulled in the direction of the hockey plant that once was. The facilities that were going to come with that. So I am curious what that looks like from a facility standpoint. The wrestling had its own standalone facility in the works, and that is obviously changed and is no longer happening. The only other thing, Jimmy, is a good question about international athletes.
Yeah.
Right now, Josh Whitman doesn't see any reason to advise his coaches to pivot off of recruiting international athletes. That is primarily Brad Underwood and men's and women's track. That is where you see
Tennis.
a lot of tennis. Correct. Yes. Good call. Right now, that doesn't seem to be something that Josh Whitman says, hey, don't do this anymore. There are obviously challenges and hurdles. We've seen that. We've talked about that. We've written that about men's basketball in particular. But right now, their status quo, he said international student athletes have been getting paid to this point. So it's not like there's that hurdle to get over. And he said, unless something dramatically changes that makes it virtually impossible, it's full steam ahead. That was the only other thing I am going through my notes here.
Yeah. And obviously he talked about the programs that have had unbelievable success. And it feels like men's basketball, we didn't ask much about just because it's been steady and it's good. He talked a lot about the draft last night, but he could not have heaped more praise on Brett Bielema and Shauna Green, right? Saying like they had a lot of the similar characteristics and some of the hardest working people he knows. And their plan has made things, they've lived up to everything they thought about when they were, recruiting those coaches here. So obviously a lot of strong words of praise on those two coaches, as they should. And he did say, kind of one of our podcast segments, I believe, has been, who had the tougher job, Brett Bielema or Shauna Green? He acknowledged Shauna's probably was as hard as anybody's. So just an amazing job those coaches have done to not only make Illinois relevant, but like really successful, like even compared to their peers, not just in Illinois relevance.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get so caught up in like the day-to-day that we kind of lose sight of how far the transfer portal helps speed up rebuilds, right? NIL can help speed up rebuilds. It can also hurt if all of your good players leave immediately. So just the way that those two programs have turned to this point, and obviously different stages, right? Shauna and women's basketball have almost entirely new group of focal players, not a whole new roster, but a lot of new faces, a lot of new roles. And that is coming probably for Illinois football more next year, but they've had certainly elements of that. You think of the 2023 season and losing all the defensive backs. But the way those two programs have thrived and gotten off the ground, those are tough rebuilds, man. And sometimes we can look past that, but those were not in good standing when Brett Bielema, when Shauna Green took over.
That is for sure. All right, let's dive into the big picture of college athletics. And there's no one, maybe besides a Charlie Baker or Tony Petitti, I'd want to hear from more, Greg Sankey, obviously, than Josh Whitman, who's the NCAA Division I Council Chair. He joked about being on the board for another ridiculously long titled NCAA committee.
Are these even real titles? I know he's doing real work, but at some point it's like we're just saying a lot of different things. Like just say, hey, we want all of these brains in the same room. We don't really need a title. Just come help us, please. We need help.
You know what I've loved about Josh here recently is I think he feels pretty strongly about where he's at, like where he's at in the hierarchy now. He's tied for the third longest tenured AD, I think, in the Big Ten, obviously Division I Council Chair. He has jabbed the NCAA here recently. He's not afraid to do that. Like it was either last year or a couple of years ago, say, hey, if we need to move out from the NCAA, if this is no longer feasible for us in the power conferences, we might have to leave them. Like that was kind of jarring at the time. But even today, he's talking about the bureaucracy of the NCAA, all of that stuff. But Josh Whitman, I would say, is an optimist in a lot of things. I think he's a realist, but he came out strongly that he is optimistic that the House settlement is going to work, that he thinks this is a good, huge step in the right direction for college athletics because they are now charting their course. They're no longer letting the courts try to, decide on everything. He's hoping Congress can help them do that, and I'll get to that here in a second. But he's very optimistic that this can work as long as everyone wants it to work, because he said failure can't be an option in this instance because they need to chart their course forward. But I also thought he was very optimistic and confident in the newly created College Sports Commission's ability to enforce NIL deals. I get it. In a capped scenario, everyone is obviously going to be a little skeptical at the very least about whether they can actually enforce and police all of this. But he said, this is not the NCAA. This is the conferences themselves with a new committee that is more like a NFL league office now that is overseeing these things. And he said their charge as athletic directors in these conferences is to investigate fast and punish hard. He wants it to be less bureaucratic than the NCAA. He thinks it will be. He wants it to be more consistent than the NCAA, which he thinks it will be. But he said, in order for this to work, we need to work fast and swing a big hammer. And I agree with him. I've said all along, Joey, like that the conferences are in charge of this now, not the NCAA that doesn't have a lot of bite. This thing has some bite when it's the SEC and Big Ten kind of policing themselves with an organization that's kind of a third party that they created. It's kind of like the conference or the commissioner's office in one of these sports. Yeah, they pay him, but he's kind of independent of these franchises. And to be a part of the conference, you need to sign up for enforcement like this. So he was very confident in that. So all these people that are very skeptical, and I understand it, I have some skepticism about this. Josh Whitman seems very confident that the CSC will be able to enforce these NIL deals through this new NIL marketplace moving forward.
He can really display that confidence. Like Josh, you're right. Anytime, like we pressed him on a couple, especially like NIL Go, right? Athletes are supposed to report NIL earnings over $600. That's baked into the contracts, basically for all Big Ten institutions. There's not a uniform contract. So what would stop another institution from not including that? And he pushed back. He made it clear, like there are a set of rules in place to be part of the College Sports Commission, and you do want to be a part of that as near as I can understand, given everyone else is, and that's what's making this all go. I still am in the, okay, all this sounds really good, and if this goes off, and they're not without a hitch, he acknowledged like there's going to be lawsuits, not because it's failing, because things need to be sharpened up, basically, and things need to be ironed out and kind of continue to think about and polish up and whatever the case is. If this all works like it's being described, that sounds like they're getting exactly what they want. I just have questions until you see it all come together and all work, that those things will actually happen. People have found ways to circumvent the rules for decades, and they've done so largely successfully. I don't, what's going to stop that?
Yeah.
That's what I wonder. And yeah, right. The CSC would be what stops it, but it's just, you got to see it, man. And shout out to Josh Whitman for being as confident. I don't know that he could have displayed any other feeling about that, right? He's been so involved in, like, you can't come out and be like, I don't know, man. Not looking great here. But I also sensed a sense of realness from him too. Like, I didn't think he was just saying that because he couldn't say it wasn't going to work. I just personally wonder if it actually will, or how long will it take before it actually goes in the way that they're all envisioning it to go.
Yeah, he's never been a naive person, right? Like he's never been hey, everything's good now. Like he acknowledged there's going to be challenges to this, and he acknowledged that we all have to be bought in as athletic directors, and in these conferences, we have to be bought into this. He said, now in my conversations with all these athletic directors, whether it's SEC or the lower level teams, he said, we want this. We want these rules. So as long as we want to do this and be a part of this, then we can enforce it. You just always wonder about those rogues, right? They're just trying to find any kind of little competitive advantage they can after being able to spend whatever they want. So there is some skepticism that is warranted. Josh Whitman, I think, is trying to fight back on the cynicism of it all. Like he thinks it's going to move forward, but he said it could be messy with some of these things, and they'll have to figure it out long term. But he did say something I thought was interesting. He said, when we're thinking about all these numbers and how to do things, everyone's always looking in college sports to figure out, like, okay, how can we get more? How can we get more money to put in our roster? Because that'll fix everything. While in the NBA or NFL, or I guess not MLB because they don't have a cap, but in those sports, you're always looking like, how can we get the most out of the money that we are allowed to have or allowed to spend? So I just found that kind of enlightening. It was kind of an interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, he knows how much is on the table for them to work with. I think he's committed to finding all of the small ways that you can maximize $20.5 million. And we talk about level playing field. I think that's the goal of this from a roster construction. I think that was an important distinction he made. So everybody is constructing their rosters on a level playing field. He said the lowest football NIL team a year ago, as near as he has gathered from people he trusts, was $2 million. That was not Illinois, but that was the lowest. And then you look at the highest, and it was north of what, I don't remember what number he said, Jeremy, 20 or 30. Is that about right? I don't, somewhere in that neighborhood. You're looking at it
again.
What was that?
Say that again.
The highest NIL in the Big Ten. Do you remember the number he
said? He said north of $20 million.
So you're looking at basically a $20 million discrepancy between the most and the least. That is what they want to try to meet as closely in the middle. And if it's not straight up levels because you've allocated a percentage of that rev share to another sport that's really meaningful at your school. So that's what we talk about from a roster construction standpoint. There are still, programs that are going to spend way more than others on coaches or, I think he said feeding or nutrition or their facilities, all of these things that allow for the variance, that those are still going to exist. Coaches, from what Josh Whitman is describing, want levelness in terms of how they can build the most competitive roster and go from there. I think it's very ambitious. I think there are plans in place to make it where it could work. I just got to see that go.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely warranted in college athletics. The one thing he was a little bit more optimistic, but still sounded pessimistic about. I asked him if he feels any better after visiting Congress and testifying before one of the subcommittees about getting some legislation passed to get an antitrust exemption from Congress, to get all of this House settlement codified into law so that everybody's playing by the same rules and that they are just empowered to enforce their rules. He said, I feel better than I have at any other point, but he said he's always thought this would be difficult and they still have a long way to go. It's just a matter of, can you get Congress, one, to take this up as a priority right now in this country? And two, can you get, especially in the Senate, the votes needed to pass this in a bipartisan way? So that, I think the main question is, can you even get, this in front of the agenda, which is really difficult right now, Joey. So it was just, it obviously went there to try and do that, because in the meantime, you're going to keep getting lawsuits. You're going to keep getting sued on all of this stuff.
Yeah, and there's going to be different laws in different states that will try to, and presumably circumvent some of the things that they've tried to level out. I do think that, to your point about that, I'm glad you mentioned it. He did. Let me find the exact. You asked him about Congress, and he made it a point to say, I think Congress sees college athletics trying. And it wasn't just like you come up there empty-handed and say, like, help. You've got, whether it's a House settlement and the fallout from that, you've got these different things where you're not asking someone to start from scratch. You're coming to them with an idea, and maybe you've got to modify this one or that one or change this or find some sort of ground on certain things. You've got a blueprint. And it felt like college athletics before the House settlement was just like, well, we got nothing. Boy, we really need some help here. Well, there was a little more than that, but there wasn't a lot of, I didn't feel like a lot of substance until now you've got a little bit more of this laid out.
Yeah, and my thing is, if there's one thing we can agree on in this country, it feels like it could be college athletics, whether red state, blue state, whatever it is. Like, everybody seems to enjoy college athletics. Now, of course, Republicans are going to more favor the NCAA in that situation, and then the Democrats are going to fight more for student athlete rights. But it feels like there's some compromise in the middle of all that. And he said it feels like the core of what we're trying to do, we agree on. It's just some of those details that got to get hashed out. So that's obviously a huge thing moving ahead, because if that doesn't happen, Joey, it feels like at some point collective bargaining has to happen. And Josh Whitman thinks it can happen without students being employees, because that is one thing none of these people want. And they keep saying, like, the students probably don't want to be employees, tax reasons, all of that. But yeah, like, obviously a huge part of domino of what's happening in college sports.
Yeah, no doubt. Anything else?
Do we want to
There's one other thing I want to touch on.
Do we need to hit on the Big Ten license agreement? Did you want to hit on that?
No, yeah, I wanted to hit on the designated student athletes real quick, but I do think this is meaningful and I think a source of confusion a little bit over the last few months. Rosters are being trimmed down. Football, for instance, let's stay there because I think it's something obviously our podcast listeners focus on. Football, under the House settlement before it was signed and ratified, was really set. Rosters were set to be trimmed by between 10 and 20 players, which was in a lot of ways walk-ons, right? That is a radical change to your football roster size, and you're really upending kids' lives who have played football. So what they've done is it's called a designated student athlete. And that is each school provides a list of, hey, these players were at risk of being cut, if not for the new House settlement. In my brain, I'm hearing a lot of walk-ons, yes. Right? That's what that should look like basically from every school. We're asking you not to cut it. So here, if not for this new settlement, these guys would have to find somewhere else to go. Those are now designated student athletes. So they don't count for the duration of their time at a program. They do not count against a roster limit. So if football has 110 players on the roster, 5 of those are designated student athletes who are pushed over. That goes to the length of their eligibility, but it also would transfer with them. So I just need to be clear. If football rolls out there with 120 people, no one's going to come ask 15 people to please leave the sidelines. That's how that works. I asked Josh Whitman, well, what would stop a school from saying, hey, this kid, I know we really liked him, a 5-star quarterback. He's a freshman. He was on the chopping block. We were going to get rid of him because we had to get to – he was never going to get cut, but you could almost get a free roster spot. Josh Whitman didn't seem very concerned about that. Coaches are signing off on this. We'll see. That's a question I still have. Like, someone would try to do that, I would have to think. But if you see more than the number that you've grown used to hearing, 105 in football in particular, that is how that's going to work. At least for really, Jeremy, the next 4 years, you would think somewhere in that ballpark is kind of not a new COVID class, but think of it in that sense that once all of those athletes are out of college athletics, and those numbers are going to be a little bit harder and faster.
Yeah, because the original House settlement said just cut it right away, right? And some of these athletes sued or raised concerns, and the judge had to approve this deal. Say, hey, go back, let's grandfather these kids in, and that was the compromise for that. I got to be honest with you. I feel like I keep up to date on a lot of this stuff because I need to. It's my job. But the Big Ten licensing agreement, Josh Whitman just fed me all that information today. So this is really new to me. But Illinois has 450 student athletes. It's a little down, but more of them will be on scholarship moving forward because the rosters are getting smaller, but the scholarships are growing for Illinois. They said about 150 of those will be entering Big Ten licensing agreements with Illinois, and that this is the way that student athletes can get paid directly from the schools. They have to sign off on something, and for them, it is their NIL rights, at least in this bucket. So they can still go out third parties and get NIL deals, all of that. But to get paid from the university, they have to give up their NIL rights.
150 rev share recipients.
Is
really what it comes down to. Yeah.
Yes. It's a good way of putting that. So that's how they do that. And by signing that, they get their revenue sharing, and Illinois is able to use them to promote the NCAA. The Big Ten can promote these athletes on billboards and promotional things, all of that kind of things. But the interesting part of this is Josh brought up that the student athlete, like by signing this, there could be if they want to transfer, Illinois has to sign over those NIL rights, which he made it sound like, I don't know if he explicitly said this, but it made it sound like there could be a transfer buyout of these contracts. But he also said Illinois is only signing players to 1-year deal. So I don't know how all that will work, but it's just an interesting part that it seems like it sets up. Could there be multi-year deals, and could there be player buyouts with the transfer portal moving forward? Did you get the same kind of read from all that as I did?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if, let's say, player X is at Illinois and they are on a 2-year deal, which is not how Illinois is going to start. Illinois is going to go 1-year deals. That's their intent. So if they're on a 2-year deal, they could transfer to pick a school. I don't care. I don't want to say this. It doesn't matter. Whatever school they go.
Bemidji.
Bemidji State they can't rev share them because they don't have their NIL rights or licensing. So you can transfer, but all of your money is going to be third-party NIL. You're not going to get rev share unless this is where I would imagine the buyout, which is not a word Josh Whitman used today, but that's what we're thinking of it as. Unless we come to an agreement, the student, the school they're departing, and the school they're going to have to find some sort of agreement, as he described it, to make that work. I am curious to that point, how many schools, I would imagine if Illinois is coming out and Josh Whitman says they're going to start with 1-year deals, I would imagine Illinois is not alone in that. There's been so many discussions. I can't imagine everyone else is doing 2 and 3 and Illinois is like, no, we're good with 1. There's probably a lot of schools figuring out what this looks like, that 1 year is going to be the common thing, I would guess, throughout at least the Power 4. But if you win a big recruitment, I would think that you will want to make that a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal or whatever that looks like.
My question then becomes, would a prospect want to? Like, does that put you in a disadvantage if you try to get them into a 2-year deal? Like, you'd have to pay more, right? Like, so all of this.
Well, and think about, you sign a 2-year rev share deal worth X amount of dollars a year, right? Well, what if you have an awesome freshman season and you tear it up and suddenly your value's gone up, but you're locked in for another year on this, or you could just renegotiate these rev share deals.
The flip side of that, what if you don't play well and you still make great money, right? Like there's
and the school doesn't want to be on the hook for a 5-star or 4-star kid who's getting paid as such and coming in and not like it's sorry, man, like you need that money.
But it's starting to feel like pro sports where it's like,
absolutely,
here's the upside of signing a long-term deal. Here's the downside of signing a long-term deal from both sides of this. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it evolves. But that's part of what is, you sign a contract, you have to live up to that contract, right? Like, so if you want a big deal for 2 years and they pay extra money, more money per year than any other school will, well, you want some security. The other side wants some security of that. So that's kind of what we've been talking about all along. It's like, it's great that student athletes are making this money, but the fact that they can opt out basically every year, like if you're a school, you'd like some of that security. So I'm wondering, is it going to be 1-year deals or we just have the transfer portal like we have it, or are we going to start to see more 2 or 3-year deals down the line? I'm skeptical of the long-term deals for either side, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I can see where coaches would want that stability of that roster stability. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious what other schools nationally are doing in terms of their rev share agreements, how long they're for, all of those things. I don't know. I did think it was notable that Illinois is beginning on 1-year deals. I do stand by. I can't imagine that's just we'll just start this way. There has to be a reason.
Yeah.
For that, right? There has to be a research reason to go that route.
Is there anything else you want to hit on here? I think we've hit most of the major topics here.
Yeah, I think we got.
It's a lot of heavy topics.
He did not. I will say he did not, in terms of those who were trying to circumvent the rules, and they will exist.
Yeah.
Josh Whitman did not specifically say what those punishments would be. I don't feel like he felt like it was his place to start rattling off the discussed punishments. So it's still not clear to me or us what those will look like, but he did not jump in.
He said they need to be harsh. And he did say, didn't he say he wants them to be more forward looking than stripping wins and titles and all of that? Like he wants
but then you can get into the discussion of, well, does a bowl ban matter for kids who weren't there? I don't know. Is it just a cap hit? Do you take a cap hit?
I'd be hitting their pocket, like fines, scholarship spots, pocket. Like that's how I would want to hit that. I do want to mention, he said, like, under this NIL Go, Deloitte and the marketplace kind of overseeing these deals, he said that anybody that is given $50,000 to the university is going to be under extra scrutiny. So any deals like that, to try and stop these pay-for-play deals from boosters, you're going to have to show that you actually have a valid business purpose for this deal. But they want to be quick with these approving these deals, or red flagging them, yellow flagging them, green flagging them, whatever they have to do. And one of my questions was, how does Illinois continue to weaponize NIL? It has been great for them. Like, NIL has been phenomenal, especially for Illinois men's basketball. But football, I think the last couple of years, it's been good for them to retain players. Now they're starting to add enough to add players. But he said they've entered agreement with Learfield that could help them grow their NIL and market their student athletes for, local businesses and all those local marketing opportunities. And obviously ICON will play a role with that, with community events and all of that. So that'll be interesting moving forward, because revenue sharing certainly will help Illinois. It'll increase overall the athletics department, especially football. But for basketball, they might actually have a smaller budget than they had in recent years. But if you include some of these NIL opportunities, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know how you weaponize that or what that goes to, but it could be a smaller budget just based on the percentages that have been laid out for us.
It was a lot. It was a lot that he covered today, but I'm always grateful that he does it, Joey, because it gives us updates. It gives fans updates about what's happening, not only internally, but externally. And he's a great communicator and explains all this stuff in a pretty great way. So we couldn't live tweet all this stuff, which I enjoy, that we don't have to live tweet all that stuff. We don't record the entire 3-hour conversation, but we did have a 15-minute conversation in front of cameras afterwards that we have on our YouTube channel here. But yeah, I'm always happy he does this. Like, he talks to us probably 5-6 times a year, maybe a little bit more if big events happen like the bowl game or the Michigan win. But this one is always the most informative.
Yeah, absolutely. And the opening statement is very long, but it tells us a lot. And it was a long one, but he's very good at this. And to your point, I think I don't think he's found his voice, because I think that would maybe take away from that he's always had. I think he's very comfortable in using that. And he's been around for a while, right? He's been around Illinois is he going into his 10th?
This will be his 10th year. Like, yeah, he's always had the voice. I think he's more comfortable in his voice and expressing his opinions, but he's also earned it, right? Like, he has earned it with how he has run his program. He's got the stability. He said today, I got 8 more years on this deal. And I'm very fortunate to have that. He did talk about Chancellor and new leadership. Like, Illinois has finally had stability, but athletically, obviously Josh Whitman's a huge part of that. And he's earned that voice. So I'm glad that he's not afraid to speak his mind on these. And it always comes with incredible thought behind it. It's not just slinging from the hip here.
No, absolutely. Just his prepared statement, it's a lot of pages. Like, I was kind of watching, there was a copy next to someone was following along, like, oh man, we still got 8 or 10 more pages here we're going through, but it's good stuff.
Yeah. All right. I think that covered it. We appreciate you guys listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. We'll have plenty more content from this in the next couple of days. Go to IlliniInquirer.com right now. Derek Piper has great stuff from Brooklyn, from NBA Draft Night, from Will Riley, Kasparas, Jakucionis. He talked with Brad Underwood and Jeff Alexander as well. So go check all of that out. If you're not a VIP member, sign up now. 50% off a VIP membership for your first year. That's more than $60 in savings. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to us, hit the notifications bell. If you're listening to the podcast, follow us, rate us, review us, wherever you get your podcasts. For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.